Hello and welcome everybody, welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be doing a little Flask project, and this project is going to be ideal if you're like a Python developer but you're also kind of interested in like DevOps and system administration. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a service monitor, and this Flask app is just going to be displaying this. So as you can see, I'm running two services over here, the SSHD service and the AppArmor service. These are just default services that come with Ubuntu, but you can monitor whatever service you want, because all of this just works with the systemd, or maybe you're more familiar with systemctl, which is the command to control systemd services. This little project is just going to show you how you can create such a project. So let's get started. So I've opened up Visual Studio Code and I'm working right now with an empty directory. So I've created a directory in my server and it's called, it's just called The Watcher. You know, it's kind of a serious name, kind of a very dramatic name for such a small application that we're going to be writing, but we'll go with it. First of all, to prepare yourself for this, you're going to be needing a few things. First of all, we're going to be writing this in Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a great text editor, great code editor. It's free. You can download it from the Microsoft website. You can just go ahead and go onto Google and search it and download it. But you're most likely already familiar with it. Also, we're going to be needing a virtual environment manager, Conda, which I made a video about last week. So you can go ahead and watch that if you don't know how to use Conda. But we're just going to be doing some basic Conda commands in here, but I do expect that you already have Conda installed, and if you don't have Conda installed, then go watch my video on how to install it, and then you can come back to this video and you can start working on the project. Also, this is already connected through SSH, so this is not working locally, and also this is working for Linux services, so it's not really monitoring anything in Windows. So maybe I'll do something for Windows as well in the future, I don't know, but this is purely for Linux because we're going to be using the systemd service tool, systemctl, to monitor our services. All right. So first of all, empty directory. Not much we can do with that. So let's go ahead and create a directory in here. We'll call this source. So we'll just call this source, and we're going to be putting all of our code in that source directory. Okay. So first of all, we don't really have a Conda environment yet, so let's create one. So let's do Conda, create -- name, and then we'll call this The Watcher. The Watcher. And then we're using Python equals 3.9, and then we're going to be installing Flask at 2.2.2. There we go. And let's install all of these packages. And there we go. Conda activate The Watcher. There we go. So we're now in our Conda environment, and just to make sure that everything is installed, let's do Conda list, and let's grep on Flask, and let's grep on Python as well. Okay, so we have Flask 2.2.2 and Python 3.9.16. Great, so our environment is set up. We can start creating some Python files. So because we're working with Flask, we need to create a file called app.py in here, and we'll create this under this source directory. We'll call this new file, and we'll call this app.py. So we'll start off with creating our Flask application, and excuse me if I'm looking at the other monitor because I already wrote this app beforehand, and I'm sometimes looking a little bit at how I actually wrote the code because I do want the app to look the same as I wrote it before. So first of all, we're going to import from Flask. We're going to import Flask, and we're going to be importing render template. Okay, then let's go down here. We'll initialize app equals Flask name, which is just going to be the object with which we handle Flask. And then let's quickly define our app.route, and we'll do just the base URL, so just /. Let's then define something in here. So let's define service returner for something like that. Service returner, and just like this, we'll define a function. And right now we can just do something like return hello. And this is going to be our Flask app, and let's see if this app actually works. So let's do, I think I still have it somewhere over here, but I'll just copy. So we can do now Python -m Flask, and then we'll do --app is under source app.py, and then we'll do host equals 0.0.0.0, and of course run. There we go. So now let's copy this over here. Let's copy it. Let's go into our browser and let's paste that in here, and it just says hello. So that's because in Flask we just defined just to return hello. Now our Flask app is already up and running. We know that Flask is working, but now we need to do a few more things. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we can actually get the status of a service. So because we're trying to make this application a little bit modular, I was thinking that maybe we can already create a few modules and not put everything in the app.py, because when you're actually developing, you want to put every file or every module that you're using, every separate function, like not function as in like defining a function, but every function that the program does, it's better to put that into separate files called modules, and we'll do that. So we'll create a new module, and we'll call this service info.py. And in this service info.py, we're going to be getting the service information. So we'll do import subprocess, import subprocess. And subprocess is going to be a Python module, and this is a built-in module, so you don't need to install it. And the subprocess module is going to enable us to interact with the shell. So we're going to be able to run shell commands with this subprocess module. And, you know, I want to do this in a object-oriented way because, you know, it's a module, and I like the fact that it's object-oriented because it just gives me the possibility to add more stuff later. Even though it's not really like, you know, you don't have to do it. It's actually, some people would even agree that it's a little bit over-engineered. And I would agree for this application itself, it's definitely over-engineered. But I just like working with object-oriented way. So we're going to create a class here. So we're going to type in class, and we'll call this service data. And then let's define our init. So define init. Oops. Self, and then let's also do services over here. And then we'll say self.services equals services. Okay. So that's actually all we need, and this is actually like, that's the reason exactly why I would say that this is a little bit over-engineered, because we don't really need to create this, because it's just like one list that we're going to pass through it, which I'm going to tell you in just a minute where we're going to get that information. But, you know, it's just the idea of thinking about, you know, what are we going to add in the future, and you never know what we're going to add in the future, so I like to do this just preemptively so that we don't have to like change the code all too much. Okay, so let's now define a function in here, and let's call this function getStatus, and we're just going to be doing self and then service name. All right, and this getStatus, this is going to be the function that, or this is going to be the method that returns the value of the current service, whether it's running or not. So first of all, we'll define a variable, and we'll say service status equals. Here's where we're going to be using that subprocess. So we're going to be doing subprocess.call, and then in here we're going to be defining a few of these commands that we want to pass it. So first of all, we'll do systemctl, And take note of how you actually pass the commands. So every time you would leave a space in between your command, those spaces are actually like the subprocess.call will actually take in a list of commands. And then the first item in that list would be the command that you would execute, and then all of the rest would be like arguments to pass it. So the systemctl is going to be the command, and then the next is going to be a few arguments. So we're going to posit a few arguments, and we'll say is active. So that's what we want to know, is active, and then we'll do -- quiet, because we don't want this to print out anything in the console. We just needed to return something. And then we'll just do service name. There we go. So systemctl is active, quiet, and then the service name. And then we'll do standard out equals subprocess.pipe, like so. And this is going to grab the output, of the standard out, which is going to be either a 0 or a 1. If it's a 0, it means that the service is running. If it's a 1, it means that there's something wrong with that service. So this service status is just going to have a value of 0 or 1, basically. And now we'll just return. And we want to return something. Let's return it in a dictionary format so that we know which service is running and which is not. So let's define a dictionary. We'll return a dictionary, and we'll say the name equals the service name. And then next to that, we'll say status equals service status. There we go. So service status is going to be our 1 or our 0, and then service name. So we're actually going to get a dictionary where we say name equals service name, and then we're going to say status equals 1 or 0. 1 again being failed, 0 being running. Okay, so we have our service info module. Let's now go back into that app.py and add a few things here. So maybe let's clean this up a little bit. Also, we're going to need to import service info. That's going to be very important for us. Service info needs to be imported. And also, let's create a new file in here, and we'll call this config.py. Again, this is another one of those over-engineered things, but you need to remember when you're adding stuff later, again, it's good to have all these separate files, because it's just a mess to look for it in the code. It's much better to have it in separate files. So we'll just add services to monitor equals, and then let's just say sshd, and then we'll do AppArmor. So these are like two services that just came up, which I know that are running on the machine. We can actually like simulate a failed situation where we have this AppArmor. Well, not the SSHD, because that would lock us out of the machine, but AppArmor will be one of those services that we're going to be disabling later, or we're going to be stopping the services later, and we'll see that that's updated on the server as well, on the website as well. All right, so let's import that as well. So let's do import config. So when we do import config, it's just going to import everything in here. So basically, instead of adding services to monitor in the app.py file, we're adding it in the config.py file, and that way it's in a separate file, and we don't see it over here, but it is like app.py knows that the services to monitor list is available to it. We'll just find services to monitor, and we can just call that by doing config.services to monitor. So we'll now initialize our service info object. So we'll do service, we'll call this service handler, just to make it easy. And we'll do service info dot service data. And we'll pass services, because over here, when we initialize the object, it wants to know this. So we're passing services, and that services can be config dot services to monitor. There we go. It's already there. Okay, and now we can do services list, equals service handler dot services. So basically what we're doing here is we're actually using this object. We could actually, maybe we could remove that because we don't really need to specify that over here. Yeah, let's do it differently. So let's do it like this. So we're gonna put this services list on top here, and we'll just do config.services to monitor. There we go. And this can be services lists. I think it's gonna be better that way. Just because it's just easier to do it. Just because it just looks better in my opinion. So now we want to make sure that when we're passing stuff to our backend, we want to make sure that it's in the right format. So we know that there's multiple services running. So we want to have like a list of services. And that list of services is going to contain a few of those dictionaries that we just created, right? Remember that we returned this dictionary format? Well, it's going to return this multiple times for each service. So we want to make sure that we can capture all of that in like a list and return it in a list. And that list then contains a bunch of dictionaries. So let's do that. Let's do services status dict list, something like that, something descriptive, and we'll make this empty. All right, so we'll make this empty, and now we're gonna loop over our services list. So for service, let's see if we don't have service anywhere. No, we don't. For service in services list, we'll do services status dict list dot append, and then we'll do service handler dot get status service, and then we'll return. And now let's try something like this. So let's just try to return this services status dict list in a string format, and let's see if that already works. So let's run our app again. Let's refresh. And now it says, so name SSHD, app armor, and the status is 0, and the status is 0 here as well. So that's great, right? So we have our list. It did get all of the information we asked it. So it's now returning it as a list with dict objects in it in a string format. But you know, that's kind of ugly. We want to make this a little bit more pretty. So that's where we get to the part where we're going to be creating a Jinja template. And a Jinja template is nothing more than an HTML website with some dynamic elements in it. And those dynamic elements are going to be filled in by our backend, by Flask, and then that dynamic data is going to be displayed for us. Now, the scope of this project is really going to be limited to Python only. And so I did create already a template, and I've uploaded it to my GitHub page, so I'll link that in the description below so you can have a look at that template if you want to try it out yourself. But that template, we're just going to go over it very briefly. I'm not going to explain everything because it's just boring HTML. I also had to look these things up online because I'm not very experienced with HTML, but it's just a basic template that will display the website in a prettier way than just the way we did it right now. So we'll do this in a separate directory. We'll call this templates. It needs to be called templates. And then we'll create a new file and we'll call this index.html. There we go. And now I have all this code already copied. So it's a bunch of code here, and it's 32 lines of HTML code, and we'll just go over it very briefly. So we have the HTML, we have a header over here, we have the service name, and we'll call this The Watcher, of course, because our project name was The Watcher. And over here we have a header called Service Monitor. We'll call that The Watcher 2. And then we have a table. We have a table head, and that table head has two headers. It has the table head has two values. It has name, status, and then we come to the good stuff, right? So right here we come into the table body. And over here, we're creating a table body, and over here, we're looping through services status. Now, don't freak out yet because that doesn't exist yet. I know we're gonna do that in just a minute here, but we're gonna be looping over that services status, which is an object that we're gonna be returning over here. So we'll be returning this over here, and we'll call this service status. We're gonna be returning that object. We're gonna be passing it through the backend, and then the backend is gonna be using that object over here, and it's gonna be looping through everything. And that's when we define the service dot name, because we know that one item in here is service, and remember dot name, so we have the value name, and then over here we'll say if the service dot status is 0, we know it's running, so we'll say running. And then over here we have this little span element that just does a little check mark. It's gonna look a little bit prettier. And if it's not 0, we'll say that it's not running. So we'll do another spam, and it's gonna be a little cross. Nice icon. Okay, and then we end the if statement, we end the for loop over here, we close the table, we close the body, and we close the HTML. So let's see how that would actually work in real life. Also, quickly going to create a new directory in here called static. And inside static, we'll call this table style.css. So this is going to be a CSS sheet, style sheet here. And again, like I said before, this is just going to be something that you can copy and paste from the GitHub repo. So let's go back into app.py. And now let's make sure that we can actually see all that information on our website in our pretty printed table. So we will return instead, we'll return render template. We'll tell it which template. So we'll tell it to return index.html. And we don't have to define any directory because by default, anything in the templates directory, Flask is going to assume that it's over there by default. So doesn't really need to be defined over there. And then we'll do services status equals services data services status dict list. See, there it goes again. That's a real tongue twister, man. Okay, so we'll return template, we'll return the index.html, and then we'll pass all of this data to the backend so that it can be displayed. Okay, I think we're actually done now. So we can do this now, and we can refresh our page, and there it is. It's perfectly working. We have the watcher. We could add some nice icons over here, so you can really play around with this. This is just a basic website that I just put together because I'm not really much of a front-end developer, as you can see. But we have like a basic application that has named the watcher, and then SSHD seems to be running, and AppArmor seems to be running as well. But now let's cause a little bit of mayhem here. So we'll open a new terminal, and we'll do sudo systemctl stop AppArmor. And if we refresh now, we'll see that it's not running. And that's exactly what we wanted. So that's amazing. That's cool, right? We have a service monitor that's actively looking at our applications or at our services. And if they're running, it says it's okay. And if it's not running, it says it's not okay. Think about all the possibilities you have here. You could have like a notification system attached to this. You could even write like a Telegram bot that notifies you when the service goes out. This is like the beginning of a lot of cool projects to me personally. And I think that we're going to be having a lot of fun with this. And this is not going to be limited to services only. We're also going to be able to do something like we can monitor our servers, disk space, things like that. Like the CPU utilization also can be monitored with applications like this. Just because we now learned how to use Flask, and just because we now know how to use the subprocess module that comes with Python. So those are already two very powerful modules because we can grab information from our system. Usually we would do that with a bash command or something like that, but now we can use Python to grab the information from bash and use that information to display information onto a website. That's pretty cool, I think. Now, of course, if you're going to be doing more stuff, we're going to be needing to add more authentication, more security, because, you know, anybody could go onto this website and see all of our services running, all of the information that's on that server. Not really the securest, but this is just, you know, this is a project for learning how to work with Flask and with the subprocess module. So that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I think that this project itself, there's going to be a lot more videos related to it. I think that next time, because now we're just running this in a development environment, but I think next time we'll try to deploy this on a real live environment with a WSGI. So it's like a special Flask server. So we're going to be deploying this with a WSGI, and then maybe also we're going to be doing some other stuff. Maybe we'll do something with like reverse proxies. I don't know. I think this is the start of a couple of nice projects. So if you want to see those projects, if you want to follow me, if you want to learn more about these kinds of technologies, then definitely subscribe to my channel. And if you like the video, hit that like button. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.